Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the News and Politics show today. We've had politics and news, a little combination of both. I'd like to welcome my next guest in, Michael Cavanagh with the Rhode Island Cannabis Association. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Kate, for having me.
Tell us a little bit about your background in the cannabis industry from the cultivation standpoint side of things with Arctic Green, and what we've seen recently this last year in the General Assembly with maintaining the status quo with compassion centers and what the cannabis community thinks about this.
Thank you. So I'm a licensed cultivator, and I have been for quite a number of years. Like many of us in the Rhode Island Cannabis Association, we've come through the caregiver and patient part of the program for years since medical cannabis was legalized in 2006. Currently, right now, I am a licensed cannabis cultivator. We generally like to use the word cannabis cultivation over marijuana cultivation, cannabis being the botanical and scientific name for the plant and the process.
So what did you think this year when you were seeing at the assembly standpoint? Again, the governor had proposed an expansion, a big expansion, what it looked like for compassion centers. Obviously, what we saw was the maintenance of the existing ones. They're going to pay a larger fee. What's the reaction been in the association?
We're quite confused, actually, by the decision made by the General Assembly today, and we'd urge them to reconsider immediately. Backing up on a little bit of history here, it's important to remind everyone, including ourselves, that at the end of 2016, the government chose to enact emergency regulations to license cultivators like ourselves. And we have done so. Over 30 licenses have been handed out, with approximately 40 more pre-approved and another 40 yet to be reviewed by the state. With that many licenses handed out to businesses and that many fees collected by the state and that much activity and that many jobs created, we expected an expansion of the program. We're still looking for that for our own business activity, but also to serve the patients in the program and in the state.
Again, we've heard this with this maintaining the status quo. Talk with us a little bit about where Massachusetts comes into play now.
That's a great point. So in all business, we think of ourselves as moving forward. If someone is not taking steps forward, in fact, they're taking them backwards. In an industry like this that is so competitive, so fast moving, and so significant, both medically and in terms of tax revenue dollars, we look at Massachusetts and ask the question, well, what are we doing here? Nothing is the word. And by doing nothing this year, we're taking significant steps backwards. And that means significant tax revenue lost, significant disadvantage to patients, and significant opportunity lost for the 30 businesses, local businesses, that are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, employing hundreds of people, and looking at the government saying, isn't this what you licensed us for?
So do we think there perhaps was a lobbying effort on behalf of some existing businesses here to maintain what has currently been in existence?
Well, that's quite possible. I mean, we work very closely with our lobbyists. We know everyone in the business works very closely with their own lobbyists. What they do is their own good business. What we are looking to do is our own good business, and what we are asking of the government is to be responsible and allow us to generate that activity of business for which they license us for and for which they are extracting fees from us, significant fees.
So do you, what do you hear within the community of folks potentially going to Massachusetts? And, you know, is there some concern there, obviously, that folks, let's talk a little bit about the competition and the price point. What do we expect now? We know it's not going to be, the gun's not going to go off on July 1st, right, so to speak. They're still going through the regulatory process in Massachusetts as well. But is there a concern about the price point?
Yes, there is, of course. We see that activity likely to happen. We recognize that Massachusetts will take its own time, city to city, to engage their legal processes. But we believe that it will be much easier for patients to, albeit illegally, drive across the border and conduct their business in another state, potentially bringing it back into this state. It's one of the reasons why we have such a disagreement with the government right now. We are asking them to engage and enact the regulated business that they created, not to encourage the unregulated market.
And have you had conversations with the Speaker's office, with the House Finance Chair's office? Have they given you any explanation for how the House Finance budget and what was approved by the House came to pass?
No, not specific explanations. So we have received Certainly good communication with many of them. They have made themselves available to us for the most part, speakers, members of the House, members of the Senate, and we have good communication with them, and for that we thank them. But we did not expect this, and we would urge the Senate to reconsider and change course while it's still possible.
Well, again, the waning days of the session, we are keeping an eye on what's taking place here in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. I had the opportunity to have Representative Scott Slater on a couple weeks ago when I was up at the State House and asked him that big question. Keeping an eye on Massachusetts, what happens during the 2019 General Assembly session? There was a school of thought that this being an election year that complete legalization was probably not going to be on the table. We saw a study commission, which always slows things down immensely. But what would happen in 2019 if state leaders said, oh, well, let's take a look, and we are, if it comes to pass, losing money to Massachusetts, and lawmakers, when the General Assembly session starts in 2019, say, well, maybe we really need to address this. Well, how does this decision from the House budget standpoint, and again, keeping the compassion centers at the level that they're at, what does that landscape look like if full-scale legalization is looked at in 2019?
There's no doubt that there will be money lost to neighboring states of Massachusetts in the short term. There's also no doubt that that question is on many people's minds. We are focused right now on medical cannabis and the expansion of the medical program. We see enormous medical benefits in research shown to us from places as far afield as Israel and Vancouver, as well as locally in Boston and across the country in the Southwest. So that is very much clear, that there is clear medical benefit for this plant and this therapeutic product. When we look to the recreational market, we recognize from viewing activity around the country and around the world that this market will take time to mature and stabilize, and that regulatory processes and governments all around us are grappling with that. We would suggest a little more pace to keep up with the pace of business. And we believe that that question for 2019 is important, should be answered affirmatively, and will have its own set of possibilities with it.
And we often see from leaders, again, looking to those examples from other states, again, we've seen expansions across the country from just simply medical marijuana to the full-scale legalization. Are there lessons to be learned from around the country? Is there enough sort of case studies, if you will, to say, here's who did it best, here's lessons to learn, here's things to avoid?
There certainly are, and the governor's office has been clear about their interest in doing that over time, and most responsible governments are doing so. We can pick and choose between those. There are certainly plenty of them to gauge results from, to parse through data from, and to observe from. And we have that information, we have that data, and we are using that data, and the government should be as well. And if they were doing so, they would see that an expansion of the program is in order, both for our local benefit and for our broader regional competition.
And what are you hearing from, let's talk about the patient perspective. You're with the Cannabis Association, you know from the cultivators and the caregivers their concerns as to where things currently stand. This must be a full-scale lobbying effort as, again, the Assembly is approaching its final days to what you had anticipated potentially happening and now what the landscape looks like.
Well, it is, yes. I mean, we see patients doing what they can do for themselves, and it's easier to get local medicine from local people than it is to go as far afield to any one of the locations of the 3 existing centers than it would be to engage in the patient and caregiver part of the program, which has been in place since 2006. So we see patients doing what they need to do for themselves, and we are just asking for greater focus on creating the regulated market for them.
Anything else folks should know while we have you in here? Again, this was a surprise to some to see this would have come out of the House budget, but it's still very much an issue in play. Is there anything else you want to share with folks?
That's right. It is a surprise to us. We were expecting that the House was more supportive of this than what we have seen. And we would just underscore the fact that we represent local businesses creating local jobs by the hundreds, in hundreds of thousands being generated to create our facilities and to engage in this business. We have paid hundreds of thousands to the state in licensing fees, and we are there to support the patients of Rhode Island. And so we're left wondering, why is this program not moving forward for the patients and for the local businesses that support it?
Well, I appreciate your taking the time to come in here and break it down as we're keeping a close eye on what's taking place up at the Assembly, again, as they're nearing the finish. Michael Cavanagh, I appreciate your taking the time today to come on.
Thank you very much, Kate.
We'll let you go around the corner and we'll wrap up here. Don't go anywhere.
Thank you.